I'm Sabrina Adams, 31, and the night my family sat laughing around the dinner table, I thought maybe they'd finally see me for the sacrifices I had made. Instead, my mother pointed at me and said the words that cut everything apart. "You're a loser. Get out of this house." They laughed. My father didn't defend me. My sister smirked. And I walked away with nothing, no savings, no home, no family. What they didn't know was that being thrown out freed me. I worked, I built, I rose higher than they ever imagined. Months later, when they came to the gates of my mansion begging for help, I didn't remind them of the $780,000 I had given them. I didn't even open the gate. I just smiled, because the loser they cast aside had become untouchable. The night it happened didn't start with storms or shouting. It began with laughter. My family was gathered around the long oak dining table, candles flickering against a polished wood, plates clinking as food passed between hands that had never once reached for their own bills. Dad poured himself another helping. My sister leaned back smugly with her new diamond earrings glinting in the light, and Mom was in rare form, smiling wide like she had just won something. I sat quietly at the far end, my plate untouched, listening. The air was thick with their casual jokes about the neighbors. The way they mocked other people's struggles like poverty was an entertaining rumor instead of something I knew far too well. My chest tightened as I thought about the numbers in my head, $780,000, drained slowly, deliberately, one request after another. Dad's failing company had been the first crack, and I had been the glue. His debts wiped clean with my money, his reputation polished back to shine, his employees saved by the invisible daughter who worked behind the scenes. Then it had been the vacations. They wanted warmth in winter, luxury in summer, and I had provided it without hesitation. Their laughter and pictures sent from beaches and mountaintops had been my reward, even as I sat in silence, working late nights to earn it all back. My sister's wedding had been the climax, a grand affair in a ballroom dripping with flowers and crystal chandeliers. She walked down the aisle glowing, her husband grinning, while I stood in the back corner, the quiet benefactor, the invisible guest. And now, here we were, months later, my account empty, my body tired, my spirit thin but still loyal. Because they were my family. And family, I thought, meant sacrifice. It was Mom who broke the illusion. She set down her glass with a sharp clink, eyes narrowing on me. For a moment, I thought she was about to thank me, maybe even acknowledge everything I had done. My heart leaned forward in hope. Instead, she pointed a finger at me, her voice cutting through the chatter, like glass shattering on the floor. "You're a loser," she said. "Get out of this house. We don't need you anymore." The laughter that followed was worse than the words. My father chuckled like it was a harmless joke, my sister smirked without shame, and her husband laughed the loudest, like he had been waiting for this punchline all night. I froze, staring at their faces, searching for even a flicker of regret, but all I saw was satisfaction. They had used me until there was nothing left, and now they wanted me gone. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I rose from my chair, my legs steady though my chest was burning. The sound of their laughter followed me down the hallway, echoing in my ears as I grabbed my coat and stepped into the cold night. No suitcase, no savings, no safety net. Only silence. The streets were empty as I walked away from the house I had once called home. Every memory of sacrifice, every late night of work, every dollar spent in the name of love, it all pressed down on me, heavy as stone. I thought of Dad's pleading calls when his company teetered on collapse, the way he had promised to pay me back someday. I thought of Mom's dramatic sighs about wanting to finally live, how I had paid for her tickets to paradise without question. I thought of my sister's shrill demands for the perfect dress, the perfect flowers, the perfect night, how her joy had been built on my quiet despair. I had nothing left. And yet, in that moment, something cracked open inside me. Being cast out didn't feel like the end. It felt like the start of something sharper, something my family never saw coming. The first weeks were brutal. I slept on a friend's couch, clutching my laptop like it was my last lifeline. My body ached from exhaustion, my pride bruised from the way I had been discarded. But with each sunrise, I worked. I reached out to contacts I had built in silence, people who respected my skills instead of mocking my presence. I built deals, pitched ideas, took risks that I had never dared take before because I had always been tethered to their needs. Now, untethered, I was free. Nights blurred into mornings and mornings into nights. My account slowly began to fill again, not with their demands draining it, but with my own hard-earned victories. I invested carefully, networked relentlessly, and for the first time, I kept every cent for myself. My reflection in the mirror began to change. My shoulders straightened. My voice grew steady. I was no longer the silent provider, hiding in their shadows. Months later, I stood in front of tall, iron gates. Behind them stretched the mansion I had built, not just a house, but a fortress. Every brick, every pane of glass, every polished surface was mine. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right, that I had always been capable, always been strong, even when they couldn't see it. The day they arrived was colder than the night I had left. I heard their voices before I saw them, desperate, pleading, stripped of the smugness that had once defined them. My father's shoulders sagged as he leaned against the gate. My sister clutched her husband's arm, her eyes wide and glossy, no diamonds flashing anymore. Mom's voice cracked as she called my name, over and over, like summoning a ghost. They looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, lost. And for the first time, I saw them clearly, not as the towering figures who had controlled my life, but as people who had consumed and discarded without thought. Now, the roles were reversed. They were the ones in need. The night I walked out of my parents' house, my entire life reset. I had no savings left, no room to return to, and no family willing to open a door for me. My only option was survival. I called a college friend, Rachel, who lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment downtown. She didn't ask questions, just left her key under the mat. That night, I slept on her couch with nothing but my bag and my laptop, staring at the ceiling until the first light broke through her blinds. I knew I couldn't waste a single day. I had already lost enough time pouring myself into people who never valued it. The next morning, I opened my laptop and made a list. Every contact I had worked with during the years I freelanced, every email I had stored, every number scribbled in old notebooks, it all went into one place. My strength had always been strategy and building relationships. While my family laughed on vacation or planned parties, I had been the one managing logistics for others behind the scenes. Now, for the first time, I used that ability for myself. I started reaching out. I didn't tell anyone what had happened with my family. I positioned myself as available, hungry, ready for opportunities others overlooked. The first project came from an old client who remembered how I had saved his product launch years ago. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep me afloat. I worked 12-hour stretches from Rachel's kitchen table, blocking out every sound around me, treating each task as though my life depended on it, because it did. Once the first project wrapped, the next came easier. Word spread. I took on work others turned down because it seemed too small or too messy. I saw it differently. Each assignment wasn't just money, it was leverage, a brick in the foundation I was quietly building. Within 3 months, I had paid Rachel back for letting me stay, rented a modest studio for myself, and set up a workspace in the corner. But surviving wasn't enough. I needed to rise. I had learned from watching my father's collapse that relying on one stream of income was dangerous. He had put everything into a single business, and when it cracked, it dragged him down. I wouldn't repeat his mistake. I diversified. I split my energy into 3 lanes: consulting, investments, and building my own company. Consulting gave me fast money, investments grew in the background, and the company was my long game. The consulting side grew quickly because I delivered more than I promised. Every client I worked with recommended me to another. I had no family dinners, no vacations, no distractions. My time was mine, and I poured all of it into my work. For investments, I started small. I studied trends at night, watched markets, followed patterns that others dismissed. I bought carefully, sold quickly, reinvested the gains. What seemed like pocket change in the beginning multiplied faster than I expected. The company was the hardest. I knew what I wanted to build, a firm that specialized in efficiency strategies for struggling businesses. I had spent years watching how poor planning ruined companies, how waste bled them dry. I wanted to offer solutions that were practical and fast. At first, it was just me with a laptop and a name I had scribbled on paper. But I networked relentlessly, pitching myself to anyone who would listen. 6 months after that night at the dining table, I signed my first corporate client. It was a mid-sized retailer drowning in debt, desperate for someone to turn the tide. I stepped in, dissected their operations, cut unnecessary expenses, streamlined their supply chain, and within 2 months, they were back in profit. The executives stared at me like I had pulled off magic, but I knew it wasn't magic, it was skill. A skill I had honed quietly while funding a family that never cared. The payment from that deal allowed me to rent an office and hire 2 assistants. From there, growth snowballed. Every success story became a pitch to the next client. Within a year, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My wardrobe changed from secondhand clothes to tailored suits. My studio became a penthouse. My name started appearing in articles about young leaders to watch. I walked into boardrooms with executives twice my age and left with contracts that doubled my profits each month. The mansion came later, almost as an afterthought. I hadn't planned to buy it, but when I stood at the gates of that estate, looking at the long driveway lined with trees, something in me decided it was time. Time to own something untouchable, something that could never be taken from me. I signed the papers without hesitation. By the second year, I had built a network so strong that opportunities came to me without asking. My investments tripled, my company expanded across states, and I had teams managing projects while I focused on strategy. Every choice, every late night, every risk built the empire brick by brick. And through it all, I never once called my family. Not after the night they threw me out, not after my first success, not after I bought the mansion. They had chosen silence, and I let it stay that way. The first time I saw them again was not planned. I was coming back from a meeting, my car rolling through the iron gates, when I spotted a group at the edge of the driveway. At first, I thought it was protesters or paparazzi. Then I looked closer. It was them. My mother's face was pale, her eyes wide with exhaustion. My father's hair was thinner, his clothes wrinkled in a way I had never seen before. My sister clung to her husband, who avoided my gaze like he already knew how this scene would play out. They had come to me. The second time they came, it wasn't quiet or pitiful. It was loud. The pounding on the iron gates echoed across the driveway, shouts carrying up toward the mansion. I stood by the balcony window, curtain drawn slightly aside, and watched them. My mother, in a coat that looked 2 sizes too big, screamed my name like she had the right to demand my attention. My father tried to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked with desperation. My sister sobbed into her husband's chest, though even from a distance, I could see he was more annoyed than supportive. They looked nothing like the polished family who had once dined in luxury at that oak table. Their shine had dulled. Their posture was bent. Their confidence was gone. I pressed the button on the intercom that connected to the gate. My voice carried across the speakers, calm and steady. "Why are you here?" They froze, startled by the sound. Then they all tried to speak at once. Mom shouted that they had fallen on hard times. Dad tried to explain about debts and foreclosure. My sister cried about losing her home, and her husband muttered something about lawsuits. Their lives had unraveled faster than I imagined, and now they stood at my gates as though the mansion was some kind of lifeboat. I let them talk until the noise tangled into chaos. Then I cut them off with one sentence. "I'm listening." That silence was sweeter than any applause. Dad stepped forward, clutching the bars like a man in a prison cell. "We need help. The bank is taking the house. The company's gone. Everything's gone. Please, just loan us something to get back on our feet." I remembered the first time I had heard that tone in his voice. Years ago, when his company had been sinking, he had called me at midnight, panicked and pleading. Back then, I had sent him everything I had without hesitation. I had told myself family came first. Tonight, standing in my mansion, I knew better. Mom's voice broke through my thoughts. We're still your family. Don't you care what happens to us? You have more than enough now. Share it. The words landed sharp. I thought of every check I had written, every trip I had funded, every late night spent working while they enjoyed the fruits of my labor. $780,000 had passed through my hands into theirs. And when the well ran dry, they had laughed as they tossed me out. I stepped outside, down the stone path, and stopped at the gate. They rushed forward, faces lit with hope, fingers grasping the bars. For the first time, I looked each of them in the eye without flinching. You called me a loser, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You threw me out with nothing. You laughed while I walked away. Do you remember that night? My mother tried to wave it off. We didn't mean it. We were angry. We didn't know what we were saying. Yes, you did, I replied. My sister wiped her eyes. We were wrong, okay? We're sorry. But you can't just watch us fall apart. You're better than that. The irony almost made me laugh. They had built an entire story in their heads where I was the selfish one, the cruel one, simply because I refused to save them again. No, I said. I am exactly who you made me, and I owe you nothing. Their expressions collapsed. My father's jaw tightened, anger replacing his pleading. We raised you. Without us, you'd be nothing. You think this mansion makes you special? You think you're better than us. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him that his collapse would have happened years earlier if not for me. I simply turned, pressing the button on the keypad beside the gate. The locks disengaged with a metallic click, but instead of opening it for them, I stepped through and shut it firmly behind me, leaving them outside. I stood face to face with them now. No barrier between us. Their eyes searched mine, waiting for mercy. I built this life because you threw me out, I said. Being discarded was the best gift you ever gave me. For once, I was forced to live for myself. And I did. Mom's tears streamed unchecked. My sister reached for me, but I stepped back. You taught me something, I continued. Family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And you showed me none. The wind cut across the driveway, carrying the sound of my words into the silence that followed. None of them spoke. They had no defense left. I turned and walked back through the gates. This time, I locked them with my own hands, the sound final and heavy. Their voices rose again, shouting, begging, cursing, but I didn't look back. I climbed the steps to the front door, pushed it open, and entered the home I had built for myself. As the door closed, the noise outside faded to nothing. The mansion was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was mine. Every room echoed with my effort, my resilience, my triumph. That night, I sat by the window, overlooking the gates. They lingered for hours, pacing, arguing, pleading with each other. Eventually, headlights cut through the darkness, and they left, swallowed by the night. I knew they would never return. And even if they did, my answer would not change. I had given them my savings, my loyalty, my love. They had repaid me with cruelty. Now the roles had shifted. They were the ones empty, and I was the one full.